Hello, everyone. I'm Father Shenan J, President for Human Life International. It is indeed a great joy and blessing to join you today for this Congress for Life. I've been asked to speak about what I'm seeing around the world and how the gospel of life, Evangelium Vitae, is still influencing the pro-life movement, not only in our respective countries, but around the world. I'd like to begin with a quote from John Paul II. And he says, "Where God is denied and people live as though he did not exist, or his commandments are not taken into account, the dignity of the human person and the inviolability of human life also end up being rejected or compromised." This is taken from paragraph 96 of Evangelium Vitae. It really does summarize what we are dealing with, not only when the encyclical was written, but what was John Paul expecting to happen if we continue down this path, what he would call the culture of death, where we would no longer see human dignity, no longer understand the inviolability of the human person's dignity, and begin to relegate arbitrarily who has value and who does not. In one of my presentations that I often give on this encyclical is titled, "Whatever Happens to My Brother or Sister Happens to Me." And it really does capture, what we are dealing with in trying to proclaim a culture of life, a civilization of love, where every human being is seen and recognized, respected, as John Paul would say, loved, defended, and served. And it's important for us to understand that there are two words that come into play when I give this presentation. The word to see, or see, and look. In the teaching on the Good Samaritan, we have an encounter with this opportunity to look at these two words. Here, the Samaritan stops. He sees the man in need. And whereas two others who had preceded him did not, they looked, they saw what was happening, but they really did not see. The Good Samaritan sees the man in need. He responds to the man in need. He recognizes his dignity. He respects his dignity. He is willing to serve that dignity, even to put himself in possibility of great harm, not knowing if the robbers were still nearby, or was it actually a setup where his life might be under threat. But he instead stops. He recognizes. He wants to serve. He wants to give of himself, his time, his resources. And in such a beautiful teaching, the late Holy Father Pope Francis, in speaking about this parable, said that, that both of them had something to offer to each other, that the Good Samaritan was there for the need of the man in the ditch, and the man in the ditch was there for the good of the Samaritan. And often we might not see that the people around us, our brothers and sisters, who we are commanded by the Lord to love with all of our heart and to give of ourselves for their need and for their benefit, for their human flourishing, that it requires us when we see not to distinguish between one need or another. Of course, as we serve the gospel of life, as Pope Benedict XVI often would say, is that we don't neglect principles, we don't neglect truth in order to serve human life. We respect those principles as we respect human life. And what he meant there is obvious by some of the things we're seeing, being promoted around the world by governments as they intrude on cultures and societies that love and respect life. But here, the Samaritan respects those principles. He respects human life. He respects the life of the person in front of him, and he respects his own. And by entering into that moment, the Samaritan is given opportunity by the man in need to reflect the corporal works of mercy, to reflect the gospel's values, to recognize the important command to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then, of course, the man in the ditch is also given a chance to see, because he sees the Samaritan, as he probably saw the other two that passed him by and thought that his life was going to come to an end, that no one was going to come to his aid, as we see in the culture today around the world, where so many people in need are not being responded to, that so many people are being abandoned and forgotten and isolated. Of course, this is not good. The Samaritan helps the man in the ditch to see that humanity is good. There are good people. And I bring this up because I want to compliment each of you, because by your direct intervention in the great campaign in the support of life, as St. John Paul II would call it, that you yourself are the Good Samaritan. You're entering into the conversation. You're stopping. You see the need. You're responding to the need. You are generous. You give of your time. You give of your resources. You give of your skills and your talents. And this is something I see globally. I want to start with the positive, that what I see around the world are people just like yourselves who are giving of themselves for the good of others. Here, I'm mindful of my brothers and sisters in Africa and throughout Latin America, particularly, that I make reference to here, who have founded pregnancy care centers, family centers, to be able to serve those in need. Here, our sisters in need and their children, their preborn children, need our help, need our time, need our resources. They need our generosity. They need us. And so when we enter into these moments, we're giving of ourselves, which is the greatest gift that we can give, to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and to hear Jesus' command that there is no greater love. And so when these, our brothers and sisters, enter into the conversation as you do, it changes the world. It transforms hearts and minds. You see, the culture of death really wants us to be isolated from each other. It wants to promote a false understanding of autonomy and individualism. It wants to isolate, which leads to abandonment, leads to exclusion, and it leads to a false understanding not only of myself, but it leads to a false understanding of others. And this mentality creeps in to our laws, our policies, the way that cultures are being formed today. And so, but on the positive again is to see people not accepting the culture of death's definition or the culture of death's, want. Instead, they recognize John Paul's invitation in Evangelium Vitae is to open wide the doors to Christ, to not be afraid, to become involved, to be involved. And he wants to see this because he addresses in that first chapter, that first section, the great crime of Cain against his brother, and how that mentality is the culture of death, how it runs and threads itself throughout society. And the only way to change that is to live in the great command of our Lord, and to look at the example that the Lord has given us and how he has loved us and how out of gratitude for that love that has been bestowed upon us and the life that Christ offers us, the gift of life eternal, that we want this for every person that we meet and desire every person to have. And so we don't exclude ourselves from the conversation. We don't remove ourselves from the difficulties and the challenges, even if we face the great Goliath of the day, which might be the government in the countries in which we live. It might be the laws and the policies that have been, implemented and signed into law. These are the challenges that are before us. And now that I have had the privilege of serving, HLI for the last 14 years and having been in 95 different countries, I can tell you it fills my heart with great joy and great awe to see people involved in the pro-life movement. One of my most recent missions was to the country of New Zealand. And there for 2 weeks, I traveled around the country, mostly in the northern part of the country, to meet with people, in their parishes and with seminarians, with priests and with religious. And it was just an excitement to hear, how they were involved, how they were being that good Samaritan, how they were seeing the needs of their brothers and sisters, how they were recognizing their own way of contributing, to promoting and transforming the culture around them. And yes, of course, they saw the challenges. The government of New Zealand, as many Western governments, has passed laws and policies that assault human life, that assault the human family, that actually prevent pro-lifers from being involved, creating, as we know with some of the abortion facilities, what people call in the West buffer zones, where having access to women in need becomes more challenging. But what I've noticed is that people are undeterred. They just become more creative. I've noticed the opening of more pregnancy care centers around the world. Here in the United States, the Catholic Conference of Bishops promoted a program, right before the overturning of Roe v. Wade, that, is called Walking with Moms in Need. and this is a very important lesson that the Catholic bishops here in the United States wanted all the faithful to understand that, this preeminent issue, this assault on human life at its very beginning in the womb of a mother where life should be protected and loved and welcomed in every regard is under threat. And so we need to be there for our sisters in need and to provide what they need, which is love, which is accompaniment, not in the taking of life, but in the serving of human life. And this is what I'm seeing around the world. I'm watching more pregnancy centers open. I'm seeing the desire for family centers to open, and I'm also watching, people become more involved in various ways that encourage me as a pro-life leader, to keep going as well, to keep teaching, to keep, all the ways in which I'm engaged in this conversation. Now, some of the negative things, of course, have become quite obvious. As the culture has degraded, as culture has become de-Christianized in the West, as we have become more dehumanized, and sadly, as the laws that assault human life have become entrenched, we have a mindset that has also become entrenched. And as we know, the way a person thinks becomes eventually a behavior, and that behavior becomes a pattern of life, and eventually it's normalized. And what we see is that people in the West particularly want to believe that, well, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing that we can change, that this is the way it's going to be. But as we saw with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, a very unjust law by the Supreme Court in the United States shows that our efforts are not in vain, that our hard work and our sacrifices are making a difference, and that there is no time to sleep, that the work continues. But also this mindset, this is something that I'd like to address with us, that in the heart of Evangelium Vitae, as John Paul began with the story of Cain and Abel, he moves throughout the chapters, particularly through chapters 2 and chapter 3, in a sense of what has been the consequence of this? What is this mindset has done? And so not just with the issue of abortion, but now we see now at the end of life with euthanasia, assisted suicide. We see other assaults to the dignity of the human person, through gender dysphoria and through all the various ways that, we keep trying to promote that we can do whatever we want. It's my body, my choice. All that mindset does is further deepen us into the culture of death. And this is something I'm seeing as well. And it is very concerning because, as we know, the culture of death and their advocates are quite aggressive. They're quite intrusive. They have tremendous amounts of financial resource. They have government behind them, a massive industry that's been created. And so we are that David facing that Goliath. And so this is something I have seen, and I believe that is working, is what you're doing in this Congress for Life. We have to gather people together. We have to start within the body of Christ itself. This, which is what brings me, to John Paul's encouragement that we have to be united in an ethical effort. He says this toward the end of Evangelium Vitae. And in saying this, what he's calling us to is to be united in truth, united in what we understand about human dignity and the human person, and how we begin to help each other, to believe what the church teaches, to believe what the church advances, and then how to bring that to bear in our parishes and our Catholic institutions. Here, I would be very specific in how we address our healthcare institutions, our schools of learning, especially our higher education, where the culture of death has found tremendous inroad in the promoting of its propaganda. We have to take back these institutions. We have to take back, the mindset that has been forgotten, and that is that every life is of value, and that every life must be served. And so we have to, through these institutions, serve this understanding. So this is why I've been so much involved, by promoting, a wonderful document that I'm hoping that you might be familiar with, and it's called the Ethical and Religious Directives for Catholic Healthcare. And these was promulgated by the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops, but they are universal principles in how the Church identifies her ministry in healthcare, what she does about it, how she exercises those principles, and how those principles are lived out in the daily care of human persons. This is very important. So for those of you who may be in healthcare, the vocation of healthcare, I want to encourage you, if you're not familiar with this document, is by going to the USCCB's website, the US Catholic Conference of Bishops, and you're looking for the sixth edition of this document. And there you will be introduced to these 77 principles. Now, back to the issue of Catholic education. As I recently experienced in New Zealand, I would say that in many of the Western countries, sadly and scandalously, many of our institutions have been overcome by progressive minds. And so, as a result, our young people are being propagandized. And as a result, their understanding of self, human dignity, and the dignity of their brothers and sisters has been forgotten. It's being manipulated, and which is leading to great harms. And as I began that this understanding, whatever happens to my brother or sister happens to me, and my obligation toward my brother and my sister to promote the good, to promote what is true, and to promote what is beautiful has really fallen on deaf ears. And what has taken its place is a false understanding of freedom, which is leading to not only to harms against self, but obviously to harms against others. So it's so important for those of you who are here participating in the Congress that are involved in Catholic education, especially administrators. This is a beautiful opportunity to bring within those institutions to bear the church's teaching and all the gospel teaching on the human values and gospel values, and help our young people to understand them and to appreciate them and to live them out. I would also say that what I'm noticing in the developing world, again, as the West, further tries, as John Paul, prophesied, in Evangelium Vitae, which Pope Benedict XVI, Pope Francis, and now Pope Leo the 14th is speaking about, is how the West is trying to creep ever more into these developing countries and to propagandize people to abandon their love of life and their love of family and their love of God. And so I would say that this is something that we need to recognize not only in Costa Rica, but also throughout Latin America, that many of these values that we have cherished for centuries has become weakened, by the intrusion of the West and the progressive mentalities. And I'm very concerned about what I'm particularly seeing in Africa, where we still see some of the largest number of families in the sense of welcoming of children. This is another area where we have to find a way of forming minds again, as Pope Leo the 14th recently said in speaking about the family, that how do we raise models for our young people to see that marriage is not an ideal, that the welcoming of children, the fruit that is born of conjugal love, of understanding what marriage is really about and its nature, its vocation. We have to raise up models, examples, and to help our young people to see that, that there's something quite beautiful and something truthful about marriage, and that and welcoming of life that they may not have heard, that they may not see, they may not even recognize because of the woundedness of our families and the woundedness of our cultures today. But what I want to encourage is what Pope Leo the 14th has been speaking about, and I'm going to really kind of fit so beautifully into Evangelium Vitae, and that is how do we model and recognize, as Leo has said, that the family is the cradle of humanity. What John Paul II, said, was that society passes through the family. And so whatever happens to the family happens to the nation and happens to the world. And so to me, this is the new challenge before us today, is how do we reintroduce the beauty and the teaching of Evangelium Vitae and the beauty of human life and the wonder of human life and the service that is due to human life, like the Good Samaritan, to recognize, to see, to open our eyes, to open our ears, and thus to open our minds to that truth and to bring that truth to bear. And we do that, by recognizing that by protecting these fundamental truths, we are actually helping society to heal. we are helping to really transform the culture around us. And we are actually, making the difference that, we're called to make, and that is to be light and to be salt in this world. And I would find that, that this is probably where the challenge remains now for us as we now look to the next, let's say, 30 years. If we step back, I was ordained in 1993. And so I remember when this encyclical came out in 1995, and I remember it so beautifully because it was something that, that I was teaching in the parishes, and anytime I could preach on the topic, I would. And having been involved in the pro-life movement, for many years before this encyclical, and that I welcomed it, and I welcomed its teaching, and it became, a great tool to bring to people. And so just as before this recording, I was out on mission, and this was one of the main topics of the 2-day workshop on the bioethics, on the teachings of the church concerning life and family. And I spent, one of the presentations giving an overview of Evangelium Vitae, and giving an explanation of how it is still relevant today, and how we still need to heed, St. John Paul II's challenge to us, and to recognize that our work is far, far from over, and that new challenges continue to present themselves, especially in the West. But I would say the same thing, throughout the world, as I mentioned in those presentations, as the understanding of marriage has fallen, to the side, how our understanding of what conjugal love and the great teaching of marriage concerning this has been lost to many, where contraception has become so normalized. It's become the behavior that people have chosen, which contradicts marriage and the marital act, and how children are no longer welcomed, and we have severe birth rates, low birth rates globally now, which are going to have tremendous negative impact upon our societies. That as our family sizes continue to decrease, it's not only going to affect society, but it's already affecting the church herself. Vocations come from our families, and the welcoming of children, and seeing within our children the future of tomorrow, the hope of tomorrow. But when we close ourselves off to the beauty of human life, and we look at human life as something burdensome and something unwanted, then all of a sudden that mindset creates, as I said, a pattern, a behavior, and it becomes normalized, where people no longer see children as a gift. And as we see with the issue of in vitro fertilization, surrogacy, the genetic engineering today that we're seeing, which all are assaults on human life and the dignity of human life, that people begin to look at a child as a commodity, something they can either throw away in the throwaway culture that Pope Francis often spoke of. They can manipulate that life to engineer it in a way that fits what they want. And when it doesn't work, well, they just dispose like they were disposing of an empty bottle. So these are the mindsets that we have to overcome. These are the hurdles. These are the things that are before you and for me today. And I welcome the challenge. I'm not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of anything that's before us. And having seen, the positive things that have been accomplished, and the realization that, as we saw a recent publication and study in the United States for 2024, 2025, we're seeing the number of abortions going down. It's far from where we want it to be, which is zero, of course. But but it does show that we're making inroads, that we are making a difference, and that we are seeing that the fruit of our sacrifices and labor, our kneeling down before the people in need, is making a difference. And we just can't lose heart. We can't be discouraged. We have to be, as Scripture says, be stout-hearted, be courageous, and look at the challenge as this is the greatest offering I can give to God. This is what I can give to God. I can give Him myself. I can give Him all that I am, and I can say yes to the gospel of life. I can say yes to the gift that is human life. I can say yes to the beauty of marriage. I can say yes to these great goods, and promote them and encourage them and help to sustain them. And so, as you gather for this Congress for Life, I know that many of the presenters will pick apart Evangelium Vitae, and maybe look at different sections and highlight them. And that's why I wanted to just kind of give an overview in the sense of what I'm seeing, what I have seen, and what I'm currently seeing. And I return now again just for briefly to what I began with. Whatever happens to my brother and sister happens to me. I want to say that this is the message that I'm trying to bring forward, to resensitize people to the beauty of human life, to help people to open their eyes, to really see, not just look. Many of our people sitting in our pews, are not engaged in this great campaign. Far too many people are sitting on the sidelines. As the late Holy Father Pope Francis said, no one is excused from this great battle to promote human life, to protect marriage and family. And this is something that we have to bring forward. We have to not be afraid to challenge even those in leadership within the church, not to be afraid of proclaiming the gospel of life. We have to support our bishops and our priests and our consecrated men and women. We have to work with the administrators in our schools and healthcare institutions and other Catholic institutions to, as one professor in bioethics during my degree in bioethics said, that we have to stink like a Catholic. In other words, we have to really smell like a Catholic, that everything about us upholds our principles, upholds the gospel, upholds what the church is teaching, proclaims, and to really be what John Paul said, to really put forth, this great ethical effort, this campaign in the support of human life. And so this is the challenge I like to leave with you. And again, just to say thank you, to express my heartfelt gratitude for all that you are doing and all that is being done and wants to be done in regard of the gospel of life. And I just want to say, don't lose heart. No matter what we face, no matter the challenges, and maybe sometimes the losses, sometimes we will not win, the battle that we are engaged in at this current moment. But we must see the long view. We must see that we are making a difference, that we are making an impact. When the Samaritan stopped, he made an impact in one man's life. And when he brought that man to the inn, what we do not know is how that impacted the innkeeper. How did it impact others in the inn when they saw this man bringing in another man in need and tending to that need? People don't often, we don't often see the impact we make. We don't often have a chance to hear the aftermath or the outcome of our interventions, but God does. And as Mother Teresa was fond of saying, it's not so much that we should be consumed about being successful. We must work to be successful. We must do all that we can to be successful. But what I would say is that we must be faithful. This is what Mother Teresa really taught, and to be faithful, to trust, to do our part, to give our part. And then when our life is complete, having served the Lord and served one another in great confidence, we can entrust ourselves to the Lord and pray that the Lord will receive the good that we have done and the love that we have given in response to the two great commandments, that we have loved God, we have loved him above all, and out of love for him that we have loved one another. For me, this is the heart of Evangelium Vitae. This is what really is the beating heart of this document, to recognize the response to Jesus' teaching of the two great commandments. So I want to just encourage you, keep going. May this great work that you are engaged in and the work that I'm engaged in and this great ministry that we serve God and we serve the noblest of all of God's creatures, the human person, that all that we do, may God bless the work of our hands. We pray that as we enter into this new time, that our efforts will bear great fruit, and that the challenges that are before us, that we will not be daunted, we will not turn away, but that we will continue to run the race to win that crown of glory. So to all of you, be assured of my prayers and my thoughts. I ask that you please pray for me. I look forward one day, I pray soon, may I join you in the mission field. But until then, let us continue to lift each other up to the Lord, praying that the good work of the Lord may be accomplished in us. God bless you. I pray you have a great Congress. God bless.